Before the world was connected, the internet was a quiet academic space, a digital frontier with no addresses, no storefronts, and no price tags. It was a language spoken only by a select few, a hidden world of pure information free from the grasp of commerce. But in this digital wilderness, one man saw something no one else did, not a tool for academics, but a map for a new world. And he realized that the person who owned the map, who named the streets and sold the plots of land, could become richer than a king. This is not a story about creating a product or inventing a new technology. It's the story of how a simple idea, placing a toll on an imaginary road, built a hidden empire. It's how one man became a billionaire by selling you something you already owned, your own name. In the early 1990s, the U.S. government's National Science Foundation managed the Internet's naming system. It was a technical necessity, a simple directory to translate complex numerical addresses into human-readable names. It was a public service, and it was But as the Internet grew, this manual government-run system became overwhelmed. They needed a private contractor to handle the growing list of names. A small, obscure technology company called Network Solutions won the bid. At the time, no one understood the power they had just been given. Their government contract came with a groundbreaking and almost unbelievable clause. With permission from the NSF, they could start charging a fee for domain name registrations. For the first time in history, a piece of the Internet was no longer free. The digital land rush. The price was set, $35 a year. It seems small now, but the cost to Network Solutions to add a name to their database was mere pennies. The rest was pure profit. They weren't selling a product, they were selling a single entry in a single exclusive list. This wasn't just a business model. It was a license to print money, granted by the same government that had nurtured the Internet as a public good. The gatekeeper was now a private entity, and the gate was locked. To enter the new digital world, everyone had to pay the toll. Suddenly, names like business.com, loans.com, or cars.com weren't just words. They were pristine, undeveloped real estate on the most valuable street in the world. Early speculators, known as domainers, realized this immediately and began buying up thousands of generic names, betting on a future no one. And for every single transaction, every registration, every renewal, every single year, Network Solutions took their cut. They didn't need to innovate or market a product. They simply had to exist, holding the keys to the only door into the burgeoning .com universe. As the .com bubble of the late 90s inflated, their position became absurdly powerful. Every new startup, every hopeful entrepreneur, every major corporation rushing online had to go through them. They were the exclusive supplier of the single most crucial element of an online presence. Their revenue skyrocketed from a few million to hundreds of millions of dollars in just a few years. It was a nearly perfect monopoly. There were no competitors, no alternative options. If you wanted a .com address, you paid their price, or you remained invisible. The company's CEO and early investors became fabulously wealthy. They hadn't invented the Internet. They hadn't built the infrastructure. They had simply been in the right place at the right time to privatize its address book, turning a public directory into a private fortune. This was the genius of their model. They created value not by adding something to the world but by restricting access to it. They monetized scarcity where none had existed before, transforming an infinite resource, digital names, into a finite valuable commodity. But empires built on such absolute control rarely last without a fight. The world began to wake up to the reality of the situation. A single American company held unilateral power over a global resource. The backlash was inevitable, and it would Governments, businesses, and internet pioneers across the globe started to protest. They argued that the domain name system was a public utility. Like the airwaves or the oceans, it should not be owned and operated for the profit of a single company's shareholders. The U.S. government, which had created the monopoly, was now under immense international pressure to dismantle it. Accusations of antitrust violations and unfair business practices grew louder. The company that had once operated in obscurity was now in a very public, very harsh. In 1998, this pressure culminated in the formation of ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. It was a new, non-profit international body designed to oversee the domain name system and, crucially, to introduce competition. The era of the single gatekeeper was officially over. Other companies, known as registrars, were now allowed to sell domain names. Prices plummeted as competition flooded the market. What once cost $35 could now be registered for less than $10. For Network Solutions, this was their great wealth mistake, or rather, the consequence of their strategy. By exploiting their monopoly so aggressively, they had guaranteed their own downfall. They had angered the entire world, forcing the creation of a system specifically designed to end their reign. But this is where the story takes its most fascinating turn. Losing the monopoly on selling names to the public was a huge blow, but the founders and early investors had one last brilliant move to play, a move that would secure their fortune forever. Before the monopoly was broken up, Network Solutions was acquired by a security company called VeriSign for an astonishing $21 billion. The founders and investors cashed out, becoming billionaires overnight. They had sold the company at the absolute peak of it. But what did VeriSign actually buy? They bought a business whose primary competitive advantage was about to be legislated out of existence. It seemed like a colossal blunder. However, they hadn't just bought the retail business, they had secured something far more valuable. Through a new agreement with ICANN, VeriSign managed to retain exclusive control of the authoritative registry for all .com domains. This is the master list, the central database that all other registrars in the world must connect to. The ghost of the monopoly survived. This means that even today, when you buy a .com domain from any company, a portion of that fee goes directly to VeriSign. They are the ultimate landlord of the .com space. They no longer own the storefronts, but they own the entire city block and collect rent from everyone. This is their invisible empire, a perpetual silent tax on a massive portion of the Internet's activity. With over 160 million .com domains registered worldwide, that small wholesale fee adds up to billions of dollars in revenue, year after year, with almost no. The young billionaire who saw this opportunity didn't just get rich from the initial land grab. The true, lasting wealth came from embedding his company into the very plumbing of the Internet itself, ensuring a stream of income long after the public-facing monopoly was gone. So what does this story tell us about wealth and opportunity? It reveals that the greatest fortunes are often not made by creating a product, but by controlling a protocol. By owning the system, the platform, the invisible infrastructure that everyone else must use. The founder of Network Solutions saw that the value wasn't in any single website, but in the system of naming itself. He put a price on digital identity, an act as fundamental and as audacious as the first person who drew a line on a map and called the land inside it mine. This principle applies everywhere, from the company that owns the patent on a specific type of screw to the firm that controls the clearinghouses for stock trades. Wealth accumulates at the choke points, the places where the flow of commerce, information, or technology can be controlled and taxed. Every time you type a .com web address into your browser, you are participating in the legacy of this hidden billionaire. You are sending a signal to a master server, a ghost in the machine, that still quietly collects its fee for having been the first to claim the Internet's address book. The lesson is profound. The product being sold was never the name itself. The product was order. It was a solution to the chaos of the early Internet. And by being the first to sell order, they were able to write their own rules and set their own price for decades to come. It's a form of wealth that is silent, persistent, and almost impossible to disrupt once it becomes the standard. It is the ultimate investment, not in a thing, but in a system that governs how all other things are found and used in the new digital age.